This is episode 3 of She Leads Data. We have a super exciting guest today. We have Ben. Ben, do you want to give a quick introduction?
Yeah, sure. My name is Ben Pearce, and I'm the founder of a company called Elevated You. And we spend all our time thinking about developing the human skills of people in the tech world.
Nice. Quick, snappy, short to the point. I love it. What sparked your interest to kind of start a business in this area?
Well, I mean, if I start off a little bit with my background, my background is tech, and I spent 20 years working at Microsoft. And about 10 of those years I spent in deep technical roles. And then about 10 of those years I spent in leadership roles, so leading teams of customer facing technical people. And that was what I was doing. And what I found actually that so often the challenge was not the technology that we were working with, but it was actually convincing people, influencing people, getting people to take action, the actions that we wanted them to take, to deploy this new solution, to take our advice, use this type of technology, whatever it was. And so actually I was spending so often helping people with how we influence people, and we tell these stories, and we get them to do the things we want, that I thought, I reckon there's a gap in the market there. I reckon lots of people need that help. And I'd like to start my own business. And I reckon I could start my own business doing that very thing. And so, sort of over the tail end of COVID, I guess when everybody had a bit of a life shake up or a chance to reassess what they were doing, I thought, do you know what? I'm gonna start this company, and I'm gonna do it. And that's what I'm doing now.
Nice. I like it. And it's great to hear why you started Elevated You. I think that communication and how tech and data professionals deliver the information is actually a very crucial part to the role, and something that I look for as a recruiter when I'm finding people is those actually people skills that sometimes people overlook as their skills when they're applying to jobs, because there's so many people that are so technical, but
Yeah,
communication is super important. I
yeah.
know that you've developed a framework to support with that. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, well, I think so. I come from a tech background, right? And so we always had things like architectural patterns, frameworks, reference architectures, um, which meant that you never had to reinvent the wheel, So when you're starting to do something complicated, you can think, well, actually, I can stand on the shoulders of other people, and I can use this framework as a jump off point. And so when I started Elevated You, that was the sort of thing I wanted to do. I wanted to do easy to remember little frameworks that were great little start off points that then you could use. And then if you then want to modify them and make them different for whatever reason, that's fine. But they're a great pattern to start with. And so everything I've done, I've tried to do like that. And so Auron is, I guess, one of my foundation ones, and it's a mnemonic. And it's spelt a bit weird. It's spelled AOREN, but the mnemonic that it stands for is for whenever you're about to either deliver or prepare for a presentation or some kind of communication that's important to you, high value, some. And so A stands for audience, O stands for objective, R stands for remembered, E stands for emotion. How do you want them to feel? And then N stands for next steps. So it's a bit of a framework that if you fill out this template of this sort of framework, whenever you're starting a presentation, it can act as like a North Star, a bit of a guiding light to help you figure out what stories you want to tell, what demos you need to do, what architectural diagrams you need to throw up, what technology explanations you need to do. But you can base it all on this aura. And so it's who's in the audience, um, what's their objective and what's your objective, what do you want them to remember, how do you want them to feel, and what do you want them to do next.
Okay, yeah, that's very interesting, and I feel like it's a simple formula that's going to be very effective and very helpful for somebody to actually break it up and look. I'm going to be doing a presentation, technical storytelling. Who's my audience? What's my objective? What do I need to remember? Emotion, stuff like that they need to focus on, and the next steps, of course. Yeah, to see how and hopefully with this framework people can find it beneficial. Do you have any, like, anything, a memorable success story or a project where this communication played a crucial role?
Yeah, and I think loads, loads. And the first one is, so if we take that audience, for example, that is the thing. If you are talking to, let's say, a senior leadership audience, and you are talking about very low level technical details, you've got your audience wrong, right? And so you are talking about things that are irrelevant to them, that they don't care about, right? And so, making sure, and similarly, if you're talking to a bunch of deep techies and you're talking at a really high level, that's when we get the horrible marketecture insult. Oh, they're just giving me marketecture. There's no substance, because you're pitching it at the wrong level and you're pitching it at a higher level. So loads of examples where if you've got the audience right, you're relevant to them, and then they start to listen. You start to influence them, and you start to be able to have an impact. One that is just springing right to my mind. I did some work with an organisation where they were speaking for. So they have like a global conference where every year, they talk about the new product announcements, what's going on. And I did some work with their product management team that were going to be on the stage. And that was exactly what we did. We were thinking, right, we've got a stage session. Who's going to be in there? Well, we've got the customer, but they're coming from not just technical roles. We've got business roles as well. So we need to think about that. And what's their objective? Why are they there? Well, they need to think about how we're going to solve these problems that they've got. So we're thinking, right, we've got these people. They want to solve this problem. So now what do we want them to remember about our solution that is going to help them to do that? So we could then get that really concise and crisp, and then think, well, how do we want to make them feel? So often in tech, we make them feel bored, or we make them feel overwhelmed, or but actually maybe we wanted to think, well, actually we want to give them confidence that there's this pretty simple solution, and actually there's a hope that they could solve this problem that they've got. And then we think about, right, well, now what do we want them to do next? Well, we want them to download the software. We want them to sign up for a 3-month subscription. We want to, whatever it is we want them to do. And so they took that on the stage, and along with some other techniques as well, delivered some awesome sessions. And it was brilliant. I felt like a proud father. I was sat in the audience watching them on the stage at this customer conference going, oh, they've done, and seeing the reaction from the people in the audience that were like, oh, this is really good. And you sort of think, oh, that was brilliant. So there's one example that was brilliant to see.
Yeah, that's super exciting. So what's kind of a differentiating factor, would you say, or do you need to be hitting all of the components for you to be successful in storytelling?
So what I'd say is this fan that the Aurum framework, right? It's a great jump off place, right? So it's not a flow, it's not a complete way of communicating effectively. What this is this is the first bit, right? And it gives you that North Star of being able to say, right, everything that I now create, the stories I want to tell, the visual aids I want to design, the demos I want to show, the architectural diagrams that I need to explain this very complicated subject. For example, all of those things need to support this Aurum framework, right? You can't just write the Aurum framework and then go, right, I'm ready. It's a bit more than that. You need to think about, right, okay, what's going to go in that content, and craft that content to be really nice. And then, to be honest, you need not to choke, right? You need a bit of a mindset, a high performance mindset. A lot of people find public speaking really difficult, very stressful, very nerve wracking. And so some techniques to be able to manage that. So, you've got this great framework, you've then created this amazing content. Now you can actually nail it. And then you need to think about how to be able to do that in different formats. So we're talking remotely on camera now. That's a bit different to if you're in a room with somebody, which is a bit different to if you're on a big stage in front of 100 people, which is a bit different to if you've got some people in the room and some people remotely on a camera. And so how are you able to nail that in those different environments? So that's what I tend to spend my time thinking around, and Aurum is like the jump off point where we start.
Okay. If we start with A, then audience of the framework, how can presenters effectively center their presentation around the audience
Yeah.
to really get as much relevance and value to them?
Yeah. So it comes down to empathy, really, right? It comes down to knowing who's in your audience, uh, and knowing, what's the pain that they've got, what are they trying to achieve, and maybe if you can start with those simple things: who's in the audience, what's the pain they've got, and what are they trying to achieve. Um, so you've got to have exercised some curiosity beforehand. Now sometimes you're presenting to people and you know who's going to be in the audience, and so you think, oh, I know, it's going to be Dave and it's going to be Lisa, and I know what they're like, and I now need to pitch it to them. But sometimes it's not, right, and you've got a bigger audience. So that's when you maybe start to think about personas, and you think, right, okay, there's
Mhm.
the persona of the head of data, or there's the persona of a director from the business. And then you think, right, well, broadly, what do heads of data care about? Maybe they care about these things, so I'm going to make sure I address that. Or what do the heads of the business care about? Well, they care about these things. So it's either understanding the individuals in the audience if it's a smaller group, or maybe understanding the personas of the people in the audience and trying to get some empathy so that you can create relevant messaging that's hitting the problems that they've got.
Okay, interesting. I We actually did a similar exercise while I was at university. I've got a product design engineering degree, and you
Okay.
had to create all these personas for for a design project. So that's interesting how you can also having that skill to transfer it to public speaking as well. And obviously that's very impactful, not knowing who's going to be in the audience. Sometimes conferences you're presenting in front of hundreds of people and you never know who's going to be in the room, rather than doing it over Teams and you know exactly maybe 4 or 5 people. You can kind of narrow it down and maybe steer your conversation to a different level than you would presenting to hundreds of people.
Yeah, and then you can use tools like AI. Like, so if you go on to ChatGPT or Bing, um, and you can set the AI to be to be that persona. So you can say, right, you are the head of data in a large retail organization. Then you can give them a bit of personality in there. You don't like change. You're a bit cynical about this. Or whatever. And then just ask them questions. What are the top priorities for you? And it starts to give you some information. Now, AIs can hallucinate. It might not be 100% accurate, but if you've no idea about what the pain and it is like for these personas, you can start to use AI and other tools to really start to get, to build some of that empathy.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. I know, as you said, ChatGPT is not very accurate, but even just to give you an idea what that persona may act like or what their expectations may be, can support you with how you actually navigate your presentation and your technical storytelling.
Yeah, yeah.
And when we go to objective, so that's the second part of the 5 parts of Aaron, objective for both the audience and the presenter, how can one ensure the alignment between the presenter's objective and the audience's needs?
God, yeah. Well, that's a good question. I mean, so in order to get alignment, the first thing you need to do is you need to know what your objective is. And so often people don't. They go into a presentation going, right, I've got all this stuff in my brain and I just need to get it out. But that's actually not, you need to think, well, actually, I am here to convince this person to use this product. I am here to sell this solution. I am here for whatever reason it is that you are in this. So you need to have a bit of clarity on that. And then to go back to the first point, you now need to have some empathy on what is it the other person wants to get out of this. Why are they giving me their non-refundable time to listen to me? What is their objective? And so if you've done that, then you can kind of go, right, so that's their objective, this is mine. And it's okay if they're a bit different, right? It's okay if you're trying to push a solution and they're trying to solve a problem. Hopefully the solution and the problem, overlap like that. But if you've got that in your mind, then you can be a bit clearer on that. And when you design the content, you can be, so sometimes there might be a massive overlap. Sometimes there might be a bit of difference, but that's okay. But starting off by knowing what that difference is means that then you can address it in the way that you present.
Ah, okay. Yeah, that's a great tip. And as you said, hopefully those objectives and needs overlap. But if you're presenting in a technical audience, there's going to be somebody in the room who might need your service or your solution that you're trying to pitch to them.
Yeah, yeah,
So remembered step three of the framework.
yeah.
In the remembered section, when I'm presenting to a technical audience, should I focus on one key message? Should I have 3 points that I'm trying to deliver? What's kind of the ideal that I would want people to remember me by?
Right. Well, to answer that very succinctly, and then let me give some more information. You
Mhm,
want a key point and some supporting messages, maybe ideally 3 supporting messages that support that key point. So,
mhm,
so that's the answer. Let me maybe tell you how I get to that answer a little bit. That's the answer in my perspective. Let me tell you how you get there. Well, I've got there. So often in tech, we have spent so much time learning a technology, learning the nuance. We get sometimes what's called the curse of knowledge, where we know so much about it, and then we get in front of an audience, and we just think, my job now is just to get everything that's out of my brain into their brain, so that then they can be as effective as me. But the reality of a human brain is that's not how people listen and how people learn. What I transmit is not what is received.
mhm,
Right? People forget things, they don't listen, they don't understand, they zone out, they've got English as a second language. For whatever reason, there's many reasons why people don't receive what we transmitted. So therefore, you've got to think, right, I need real clarity on what my key point is, my elevator pitch, almost like the title of my talk,
mhm,
what is it that we're all here to talk about, and why is it? And then you maybe just want 3 things that back it up, so if you were here to say, right, I am here to talk about why this technology is really relevant to your organization, for example, and then maybe you've got just 3 things you want them to remember: that it performs better than anybody else's as his stuff, it's actually a really cost effective solution, and it's got security from the ground up, so
mhm,
maybe you just want those 3 things, and you just want everybody in that audience to leave thinking, okay, well, this is a great solution to my problem. It's really secure, it's really cost effective, and really performant. That's what you want them to leave with, and then you can then have substance and depth on each of those topics beneath, but they're all linked to that key topic and those
mhm,
subtopics as well. And so then just design everything, your demos, your stories you choose to tell, your visual aids, design it all to support those 3 things. And there's loads of things that the technology that you work in will do that don't fit in those categories. But you go, well, I've only
mhm,
got 45 minutes, so I can't talk to them about all of these things that don't fit in those categories. That's maybe for a follow-up call, or that's for a day's training, or that's for them to go and read on the website or watch videos or whatever it is. This is what I want them to remember, and so that's how I'm going to organize everything I say around that. So yeah, I would say move away from this idea that I've got loads in my brain and I just want to get it into their brain, and move to the mindset of, what is it I want them to remember, and how do I get them to remember that?
yeah. What about if somebody has so many points? Their product does this and that, and they want to include all these things, but at the same time, as somebody who have sat many times in the audience, I can get lost, and those points, maybe the most important points, may be overlooked. How would you suggest somebody actually picking out maybe those 3 supporting points to their key points, if they're struggling, with their message,
Yeah.
they want to include everything?
When I'm going to go back to that first point, audience, right? Who's
Mhm,
in the audience? Have I got a load of business leaders? Have I got a load of graduates? Have I got a load of architects? Have I got a load of developers? Have I got mixed personas where I've got some graduates, some business leaders, and some architects? If you can understand a bit about who's in your audience, then you can figure out what might be most relevant to them. And that then informs you, which is why this is a great template, because it then says, right, based on my audience, this is what I
mhm,
want this audience to remember, which might be different to you what you want another audience to remember. So I would say use that audience and that empathy you have for the audience to understand what are those things that you want people to remember. And if you've got a broad audience with different personas, well, that's useful information to know. So maybe the point is a bit more generic, and
Mhm.
maybe you pick out one area that's going to really excite persona 1, one area that's going to excite persona 2, and another area that might excite persona 3, for example.
Okay. Okay. That might be helpful for somebody, who's not sure how to approach that issue. Again, a Teams call with a smaller amount of people, you might be able to identify that a lot easier. But maybe in a larger audience, that maybe a little bit tougher to kind of
Yeah,
narrow it down.
yeah,
But yeah, super important to look at your audience and actually understand who's there and what the information you want them to leave with, and as you said, remember.
yeah,
Um, so emotion, which
yeah.
I often think is overlooked in the technical presentation. Why do you think that is, and how can presenters be more have more emotional elements in their presentation to leave a long-lasting impact?
Yeah. Well, yeah, tech is very logical, right? It's very rational. Computers are very, binary, right? By definition, that's kind of how they work. So firstly, that the product that we work with is very logical, systematic, rational, right? So that's the first thing. There's also a lot of people in tech that are very logical, very rational in the way that they think about things. But I think what we often forget is that we're all humans, and actually, all humans have a level of emotional connection to things. And what's interesting, when you look at it from a neuroscience perspective, right? If you just talk about something logically versus talking about something with logic and emotion, the logical stuff we forget, the stuff where there's emotion we remember, right? And the reason for that is if you're just talking about logic and rationale, the hippocampus, the bit of your brain at the front, is what fires. Okay. If you're talking about emotion, it's the amygdala at the back of the brain, right? And that's pure emotion. So if you can get both of them firing at the same time, something that's emotional and has got a good argument, a good rationale, some good logic behind it, the brain remembers it. So, if our job is to teach people stuff or help inform people of stuff, and then we want them to remember it because it's useful, if we can get them to make an emotional connection to that, they will remember it. So therefore, it's really important that we go, actually, there is substance, there is logic, there is rationale, but there is also some emotion to this. This is going to make your life better because of
Mhm.
X. It's going to stop this pain of Y. And I'm going to share this story about where somebody went through this pain and came out the other side and felt better, or, if you start to share those human stories and then back that up with some substance and depth, that's when it gets really, really powerful. And so it's acknowledging that whilst the logic is really important, the
Mhm.
emotion is really important. And so think, do I want people to be angry at this problem? So maybe climate change, for example. You go, right, I want to create an emotional reaction that people find this unacceptable and want to do something about it, right? And then later on, I want to now give them, and this is a hope and confidence in the way forward, right? So you're thinking, right, I want to get them angry, and then I want to get them confident that this thing will help them, solve their problem. So yeah, start to think about how you might try and do that in the presentation that you're doing.
Yeah, that's very interesting. You say that, and it all makes sense when I've been to loads of conventions and conferences where a talk has actually made me feel something. That's something that I actually pass on to other people and talk about it. But stuff that's maybe been too technical and too logical, because everything is like that around tech, is maybe
Yeah,
less remembered by the audience.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that emotion is actually a crucial part to storytelling.
Yeah, completely agree.
And next steps. So final part of the framework, the final component. So I've done my talk. I think I've done really well. What's my call to action? How do I actually leave the audience with a clear call to action and the next steps for my presentation?
Yeah. Well, so the first thing there that you've done is already half the battle, is that you've said, what is my call to action? What is my next steps? Lots of people don't even think about that, right? They say the thing they're going to say and then go, oh, I finished. I'll send you the slide deck. That is the call to action, and then this
Yeah.
60 megabyte file full of pictures and diagrams and embedded movies or whatever it is the next steps. So what I'd say is your backup. There is a great book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of
Okay.
those is, you've
I've
read
done
it.
that. Yep.
Right, it's a brilliant one. And one of the 7, I won't quiz you for all of them because I can't remember all 7 either. But one of them is begin with the end in mind. And a presentation is never the end, right? A presentation is normally a means to an end. It's about informing people about this stuff or telling them about this stuff so that something happens after. And so we need to think about, what is the something that happens after? What do we want them to do next? Do we want them to go and try a hands-on lab? Do we want them to join a community? Do we want them to book another meeting with us so that we can come in and go through it in more detail? What is it that we're trying to achieve, and what do we want them to do next? And think about that. Now, if you're in a broadcast situation, so when I say broadcast, I mean you're on a stage to many people as opposed to a little Teams meeting where it's more of a conversation, then you want to just get those next steps and make them as clear and as frictionless as possible, right? So after this, I'd love you to sign up here. Here's a QR code to do this. Go to LinkedIn, connect with me and see all the free stuff I'm going to be giving you, or whatever it is, right? But if it's more of a meeting where the next steps you didn't know at the beginning, because we need to have a conversation and we need to figure out, the way forward, make sure that you've protected and ring fenced some time at the end of that session so that you've got 5 minutes or so at the end where you go, right, let's just talk about next steps. You're going to do this, Kat. I'm going to do this. When are you going to do it by? And then make sure that you write those down and send them around as like some actions at the end, because that sort of then drives the next steps. It drives the change. It keeps the energy and momentum going. So basically, if you're broadcasting, make sure you've got some frictionless, clear next steps that you make sure that you give to everybody. And if you're deciding them in the meeting, make sure you protect and ring fence that time at the end to get all the next steps documented, allocated, a time when they're going to be done by, and then mailed round to everybody.
Yeah, I think the time to get it done by often gets overlooked. People can have a great call to action, we should do this, but then they don't tell you by when. So that could be, if it's urgent, that needs to be done by tomorrow, or if it's in a month time, or maybe by the next quarter. So I
Yeah,
think that time actually creates a sense of urgency, so you kind of get things moving a lot quicker as well. And I think
yeah,
without it, in any business,
yeah,
you're probably, all your processes become really, really slow, just for you not to say, I want this, can we have a catch up next week?
yeah.
You'd have ruined my stuff, and very crucial piece of information here.
It is, absolutely.
For the Data Gals audience, who would love to start and try this framework if they haven't already, what are some tips that you can recommend for them to get started?
Yeah, well, so first thing, it's really easy, right? You just write down, right, or get a Word doc or a OneNote or wherever it is you write your stuff down and go, right, I'm just going to write down the word audience and then leave a couple of bullet points, and then I'm going to write down objective and a couple of bullet points and remember. So it's not massively complicated. You don't need a tool or anything like that. Just write it down. The challenge is figuring it out, right? What do I want them to remember? Right? You need to therefore really have thought of, what are all the topics that I could cover? What are the themes I could cover? Now, what are the most important ones? So I would say that it goes back to that audience. get to understand your audience, exercise curiosity about the people that you're going to be talking to, and understand how you can be relevant to them. Because if you can be relevant to them, then you can be valuable to them, and if you're valuable to them, then you're going to influence them. So I would say it's not hard to write down the framework. The hard bit is asking the questions, getting the answers, and building that empathy. So I would say just start to talk to people that you know that you need to influence to understand their perspective. And that's probably how I'd start.
Okay, yeah, good. And when we move to kind of future outlook and how communication and maybe communication technologies continue to evolve in the field of data and tech, where do you see it going?
God, that's a good question. The first thing I'd say, well, I love tech and I love new shiny things. Also, my tagline is tech world, human skills, right? The tech world is changing at such a pace.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff I've been talking to today is the same stuff that Aristotle talked about in ancient Greece, right? This idea, like, he used to say that when you talk to people, you need some credibility of who you are, you need some logic and rationale, and you need an emotional connection. That was what he used to talk about, right? So Aristotle used to talk about that thousands of years ago. So humans don't change that quickly, right? And so the good thing is, if you invest in being able to do this, it's gonna last you, your career. It's a really, really great skill. But the tech's going to change a little bit, right? So we're recording this on some technology now. You've got Teams, you've got Zoom, you've got this idea of short form video that's a bit newer, like with TikTok. So how do you create content that maybe fits in short term video? But then you've got this long form communication, like we're on a podcast now. So this is going to be however long it is, half an hour or whatever. So you've got all of these different technologies that are basically different formats of the same stuff, right? And if you're doing a short form bit of communication, you still need to be relevant to the audience. You still need to know what you want them to remember, and you still need to know how you want to make them feel. Same thing on a podcast, or same thing in a conference or whatever. So I think it's a fusion of getting these lifelong skills and fusing them with whatever comes up, and then using tools like AI. I've already talked about how you can use that to help build empathy, use that as a way to build empathy for your audience. So as these new tools, just be open to embracing the new tools and how they can best serve this age old set of skills that are going to be relevant, throughout your life.
How do you stay updated yourself, Ben, on the latest trends?
Yeah, great question. So I would say, firstly, it's investing a bit of time. You've got to invest time to learn, and that's the hard thing to do, isn't it? When people are super busy, making sure that they ring fence a bit of time to learn about these things. And then it's just where do you learn? There are some so LinkedIn's a great source of stuff, I find. TikTok's a great sort of stuff. You're scrolling through and you get little tips. You find out about new people. Love reading books, courses. I mean, talking to people is the best way for me to learn. If I can get an hour with an expert and really talk to them about how so for me, I run my own business. I've got a tech background. My marketing background, I didn't have one. And so, or my accountancy background, how do you run a business? No idea. So if I can get an hour sat with an expert that will tell me how to do it, well, that's how I learn the best. So I think it's just, making time and finding ways that work for you.
Yeah, that mentoring aspect I think goes a long way. Doesn't matter what field you're in, you can learn so much. As you said, just sitting with an hour with an expert, asking loads of questions, that will give you so much insight.
Yeah.
Even comparing to even maybe watching some YouTube videos or
Yeah.
blogs and stuff like that, because they are the person in this field.
Yeah.
And yeah, with the Data Gals, we've set up a mentorship program for females in the industry, which is super exciting.
Yeah.
So you can get as much value from those experts as possible, and hopefully see a diverse industry flourishing.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Um, what about kind of any emerging trends that you've seen in the nearest time in the field of communication that particularly excite you?
God, emerging trends in the field of communication.
Or maybe tools. I mean, you mentioned ChatGPT being one that you can kind of play about and look at the potential audiences that might be in the room. Is there anything else that a tool that people may use to find helpful?
Yeah, so if I think about the tool set that I use when I'm communicating to people, right? The ones that I tend to use, the methods that I guess I really use are video on demand, because people can, like the YouTube type stuff, because then people can go and learn whenever they want, so that's really useful. So that's really important. Live presentations, so using tools like PowerPoint effectively, and getting a bit of skills in how you use animations so that you can control the flow of what people see on the screen, and so that you don't overwhelm them with a million bullet points that distract them. And then the other thing is a little bit of, and I'm not a graphic designer by any means, but how do I post things in places, like LinkedIn or places like that, that look all right, that don't look awful. That's probably what I'm aiming for. And so Canva is probably so. And so if I sort of think about the tool sets, where I spend my time in DaVinci Resolve as a video editor, which is a way for me to create video on demand content that looks quite nice and that can help people learn. I spend my time in PowerPoint, not doing super crazy stuff, but just being able to design stuff that's got some good visual storytelling, as well as a good narrative. And then when I need to talk to people, through the written word, having diagrams and stuff like that, and Canva helps me do that. So that's probably my modern tool set that I'm using on a daily basis to try and communicate effectively with people.
Yeah, very similar to me. So hopefully I'm on the right tracks here, Ben. And yeah, just some final questions before we wrap up. Any additional advice on how to share with our audience about effective communication?
Yeah, well, so I spend all of my time doing this, really focusing on how do we, in this complicated technical world, manage to communicate effectively. So that's what I spend all my time doing. So on LinkedIn, I pop loads of stuff. So there's loads of content that I whack for free on LinkedIn, and that including the Aurum framework. So if you go onto my LinkedIn profile and click on the featured section, there is, if you what the Aurum framework, that's where that is. So that's one place where I spend a lot of time. Second place I spend a lot of time is I also do a podcast called the Tech World Human Skills Podcast, which I take, loads of different guests that are working in the tech world and have got useful stuff for us in the tech world, but it's not the deep tech. I'm not talking about what's the latest with Google Cloud or AWS or Microsoft or whatever. It's those sort of human skills. And then what I then love to do is then work with organizations. So I come in with organizations or individuals and coach them, give them some depth training to really help them be successful in their job. So those are sort of the places where I spend my time and the
Mhm.
things that I'm doing.
Nice. And any exciting projects at the moment that you're working on, if you can share them?
Yeah. Um, oh, good question. So, exciting projects is just working with new organizations. Firstly, that is just awesome. I love it when I go in and I'm starting to work with a new organization to understand the challenges they've got, and how I can help them. So, lots of work with new organizations, which is good. And then I do some video on demand courses, and I am working on one at the moment. Um, I haven't named it yet. I haven't got a release date. It's a bit early, but what the heck? I'm going to share it. It's an exclusive anyway, which
Stay
is what I
tuned.
call
Yeah.
is a community speaker course. So there's lots of people that want to speak at like community events, user groups, that kind of stuff, and would just like a bit of help to build their confidence on how they do that. And so some of the community leaders have asked me to put together a course on if you're going to speak at a community event, how do you take that aura and make it relevant to a group of people that would be at a tech community event, and how do I plan it and how do I structure my talk and all of that kind of stuff. So that is in development at the moment. I've got no ETA. It will be coming out, but there you go. There's a bit of an exclusive of something that I'm working on at the moment.
Oh, thank you so much, Ben, for sharing that. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on to the Data Gals platform and sharing your framework that you have built on effective communication and technical storytelling. It's very helpful, and I've actually learned a lot myself. So thank you so much. And please, everybody, check out Ben's stuff and Elevated You. And I hope everybody has enjoyed this episode and looking forward to seeing you at the next one.